And now on WRS, Michael McKay with the McKay Interview.
Hello everyone. This is the last of my mini-series on COVID-19 and pandemics. And today is the 8th of July 2020. The summer schedule will soon start on WRS and the McKay Interview will take a break for a few weeks. I've devoted this final program to religion. To be precise, and in the interest of brevity, I'll look at our subject, the coronavirus and pandemics, through the prism of Christianity. I have as my guest today someone well known to many of you listening to this program. Whether you are Genevois, Christian, Protestant, or just from the UK, you'll probably know or know of the Reverend Dr. Bill McComish. He's wise and ubiquitous and always a pleasure to be with. And he's been in Geneva a long time. He was born in the United Kingdom, in Northern Ireland to be precise, and started his ministry as a pastor in Ireland in 1974. Very early on, he was involved in interfaith dialogue in Northern Ireland. That would have been in the time of what is euphemistically called the Troubles. He arrived in Switzerland in the 1980s, where he earned his PhD in theology. He then became the Dean of the Cathedral of St, Pierre Geneva, an important position in the city of Jean Calvin and world home of Protestantism. Dr. McComish retired a few years ago. He's a visiting professor of the history of religions at the University of Oxford. His experience in interconfessional dialogue and mediation brought him to act in conflict regions in Africa and Asia, namely in Indonesia. Among the many books he has written, he is co-author of the Geneva Spiritual Appeal. Hello, Reverend McComish. Welcome to the McKay Interview, and thanks for making time for me. And would you mind if I called you Bill? After all, we've known each other for quite a few years.
Yeah,
Bill
including some of my grandchildren.
It's okay,
yes.
Really?
Yes.
That's good. How many grandchildren have you got, Bill?
9.
No, congratulations.
As far as I know.
Congratulations. Go forth and multiply, the good Lord said. Yes. Bill, these are very difficult times. Since the coronavirus changed our lives 3 or so months ago, it's forced many of us to look at life differently. And for many, religion or faith play an important part. It's also true to say that religion plays no part at all in the lives of an even larger number of people. Yet historically, religion or religions have shaped our values, laws and customs all around the world, whether in the West or the East, the North or the South. So it seems right and fitting to address themes of religion and faith in this, the final interview about the pandemic. My questions probably won't surprise you, so here's the first one, Bill. In this present deadly public health pandemic, how do you respond to those with faith who also have doubt, like me sometimes, and ask you, where is God?
Well, God is everywhere. God is within you. God is surrounding you. And if your question is what I think it is, I think you are perhaps mixing up two things. One is spirituality and personal faith, and the other are religious institutions, which are quite different things. And while most people today in our modern world in Geneva have very little respect for religious institutions, most people have their own form of spirituality, whether they would describe themselves as believers or not. But I very rarely meet people who believe in nothing at all.
Could you go into a little bit more detail in explaining, particularly for the benefit of people who may not have any notion of religious activity, the difference between the spiritual, the personal, and the institutional? Just give us one or two examples.
Well, the institutional are the churches or the Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist institutions, which are institutions like anything else, and they are organizations which organize the life of communities. They have finances, they have buildings, they organize ceremonies in public, they look after people when they want to get married or when there is somebody to be buried. That is a religious institution. But the individual today is a funny mixture, but it's not new, of our physical being and our intellectual capacity, and something else, which is our spiritual awareness. And that spiritual awareness is part of everybody's makeup, not just people who describe themselves as believers. So I tend to be very wary of people who say that they are not believers, because maybe they don't believe in God, but I believe that God believes in them.
Well, that brings me to my second question, again, a question which won't surprise you, Bill. How do you answer those who are agnostic or atheist and, in this current crisis, ask you pointedly, Bill, where is your God, the Christian God? And though I'm not really a Bible-reading person myself, the words of St. Matthew's Gospel that I've known since my childhood spring to mind, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? What does Scripture teach us, and what do you believe regarding the Christian God?
Well, that, of course, is Jesus on the cross.
Yes.
I think if you are simply thinking that we have a problem, and God, like a fireman, should come rushing to our help, I'm not quite sure that you have a very good understanding of the role of God in the universe, because God has many aspects and a great deal to teach us. God has given us intelligence and ability and values, and placed us in a very demanding world. Now, I think our trap is that for years we have believed that the world is not that demanding and that we can control it. And suddenly we have this thing, this virus that appears, which we cannot control. And I think that shakes our faith, not in God, but in ourselves. So that is one aspect of this thing. But the other thing is that the pandemic in English.
Pandemonium.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I think a lot in French. Is that it has exacerbated social and political cleavages. The poor have become poorer. The health systems are terribly strained. And the role of Christianity, the role of religion, is to remind society that we have values. And these values, as you said yourself at the beginning, these values come very much from Christianity. And this is something which we need to emphasize, especially with some of the riffraff that occupies political leadership in certain countries at the moment. It is important that we emphasize the importance of social justice and tolerance and love and charity and justice.
And in fact, these aren't just Christian values, these are universal values.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this is part of what we have done in Geneva for many years. It's something I helped to write, the Geneva Spiritual Appeal, and all religions can subscribe to this, including people from civil society and people who are not actually visible members of a particular religious tradition. These are universal values.
Part of the community.
Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, they are. But of course, we see in these populisms today, as we have seen in the past, that these can be very quickly set aside.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you can help me with this one, but just looking into history, can we learn spiritually from how humankind reacted and dealt with previous pandemics, whether plague, cholera, influenza, typhus, or any of the other mass killers that have inflicted themselves on us over the centuries?
Yes.
Well, what can we learn?
It's not all positive. I think many bad things came out of this. one of the reasons for the development of the idea of hell arose from the Black Death. I mean, it wasn't really a part of Christian theology before, but suddenly punishment, flames and all that. And they think it changes the idea of God, because there are always people who are very keen to say, as some people have said this time, that of course the bad things that happen are a punishment from God, because we are so bad that he has to punish us. I think this is absolute nonsense. I think it's bad theology, but unfortunately people will use this as some of the fundamentalists in America have used it to say that it's of course because we permit homosexuality or abortion or something that God is going to punish us. This is nonsense. But I think the good aspect of these pandemics is that it makes us more communal. It brings people together to work together, because suddenly you realize, especially when you stop church services, that you realize that people need to get together. They need to be part of a physical community.
We're going to come on to this a little bit later, Bill. That's good,
Yes.
but it's good that you mention it.
Yeah.
My guest today is the Reverend William Bill McComish, formerly Dean of the Cathedral of St. Pierre Geneva, the world home of Protestantism. And we're talking about religion in this time of crisis, anxiety and COVID-19. Bill, in the records of the Diocese of Geneva, are there any particularly illustrative stories that you could share with me of previous great privations caused by public health crises, and how the Genevois coped at the time?
Well, the Genevois, you know them as well as I do, and they coped with them with their usual pragmatism and their usual tolerance. I'm not aware of any very illustrative stories from Geneva itself, but since we are dealing with an English-speaking audience, there are two things that people might look at to discover the experience of an epidemic. One is Daniel Defoe, who was a Presbyterian like myself, the man who wrote Robinson Crusoe, and he wrote a marvelous book called A Journal of the Plague Year, and that is something which is well worth reading.
And for the people not familiar with his name, that would have been the 17th century. The plague of 1665.
Yes, yes. And it's a marvelous book. And the other document, if they can get it, comes from Ireland, and it is a chilling document from Friar Klin, who was a friar at Kilkenny. And he starts off writing the history of the Black Death. And, you know, it comes to the cities and the coasts of the Mediterranean, it comes to Paris, to London, to Dublin, and eventually to Kilkenny. And he writes his chronicle, if perchance any of the race of Adam should survive, because they thought they were all going to die, which is not something I think we're aware of this time. And he continues his chronicle. Eventually the plague enters his own monastery, and the chronicle breaks off and is continued in a different handwriting.
Interesting.
The Chronicle of Friar Klin, it gives me the heart.
And how do you spell Klins? Is it
C-L-Y-N?
C-L-Y-N in Ireland, okay.
Yeah.
Bill, as the doors to places of worship were closed on the instructions of the public health authorities, how did you adjust, especially over Easter and Pentecost, which occurred during the lockdown? And what have your parishioners requested of you? And if you can, give me some examples of things that surprised or even amused you.
Yeah, I don't think anything amused me, but I I have always been aware, because it happens that I have to preside a certain number of funeral services, that, when somebody's dead, people don't have much to say, a few platitudes, but their physical presence to the bereaved family is extremely important. The funeral service is important not because of what people say, but because people are there.
Bearing witness.
Yes, and this is part of the whole church service thing, that it is important to feel that you are in an enclosed space with other people. You're different from them, you're separate from them, but you are all praying together, or all singing together, or all listening to the same sermon. And so it is, when this is suddenly stopped, people feel orphaned. And the community, we only realize its importance when it is taken away from us.
I understand that, yeah.
Yeah.
And what is the current situation today, Bill? Are the church doors open once more? What are the new rules?
Yeah,
and are you seeing more people attending than before the lockdown? I mean, has your congregation increased?
Ah, yes.
Yes?
People always...
But you say that in a matter-of-fact way. Ah, yes. I mean, that obviously didn't surprise you?
But, I mean, I have been a minister for, 50 years or something. And I've always noticed that in times of stress or fear, that people come to church. And so, yes, of course, at the moment we have an upswing in the number of people that come to church, because people are looking for comfort, they're looking for hope, they're looking for reassurance. And if you don't get that in the church, I don't know where you do get it.
It's true. And during these very difficult times, this is my last question, Bill, these difficult times for all of us, and some are suffering obviously more than others right now, has there been any attempt among Geneva's major Abrahamic religions to engage with each other, or is this already a well-established process in Geneva? Just tell me about it,
Well,
please.
I'm amazed that you say Abrahamic, because in fact in Geneva we all know each other. And at my birthday party on Sunday, I mean, there were Scientologists, and there were Muslims, and there were Jews. We all know each other.
Well, it's refreshing. I didn't know.
In the Spiritual Appeal Committee, there was Jérôme Ducour, who is a Buddhist bonze, a Buddhist monk. We have very close relations with the Swami Amarananda, who is from the Vedantic Center. So it's not just the Abrahamic religions of Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Baha'is, but there is another organization which is the Interreligious Platform. But Geneva, we have the advantages of having a stable population, and we've all been together for a long time, and we all know each other. And there are many in Geneva. I had a class at the Brechbuhl School a few years ago, and I asked these children how many of them had more than one religion in their family, and it was more than half the class.
Good heavens, yeah.
So, I mean, this is a situation where we're in. My own wife is Muslim, which surprises nobody in Geneva. Doesn't cause any comment at all. I had an adopted daughter who's Vietnamese who is Buddhist. So this starts at home.
So this is the universal church right here. And
yes.
we're doing this.
And you respect. It is the stupidest thing is to say, well, of course we're all the same. No, we're not all the same. We have different ideas and different forms of worship. But This is something, the difference is not something which diminishes you, the difference is something which enriches you.
It's true.
Yeah.
Bill, we're out of time, I'm afraid. I could talk to you for much longer. And by the way, belated happy birthday to you. Thanks for answering all my questions so fully. It's been a pleasure, as always, talking to you. My guest today has been the Reverend Bill McComish of the Cathedral of St. in Geneva. Thank you, Bill.
Come back soon.
That was the McKay Interview with Michael McKay. And don't forget, you can hear that interview again on our website, worldradio.ch.
Hello everyone, Michael McKay here. It's been an interesting journey since my first interview in this mini-series on COVID-19 with Dr. Bob Bishop back in April, and now my last this week with the Reverend Bill McComish. As I said at the outset, my intention was to raise my level of knowledge about this pandemic, and I hope yours too. What has become clear to me over the past 3 to 4 months are the paradoxes that have been thrown up. For example, the deadly nature of COVID-19 when contrasted with its fiendish complexity. How rapidly the scientific and medical community have made progress in their search for a vaccine that works for all, when contrasted with the many holes in their knowledge about it that still exist. How this pandemic has been politicized by some so-called leaders around the world whose behavior has been reprehensible and whose leadership has been a disgrace when their citizens needed them most. How lucky most of us are that we are not in political office today, having to make such difficult decisions, weighing up so many competing and conflicting variables. What springs to mind immediately is the health versus wealth dichotomy and the urgent need in many countries to get their economies going again quickly and getting people back to work after an almost total lockdown amid now rising unemployment as many businesses fail. How a sense of community is so important, and how individuals pulling together as communities contribute a huge difference to making our lives livable again as we adjust, because that is what we will have to do until and if a safe vaccine is created and distributed, to living with this wretched virus. And so in closing, I have no profound answers on COVID-19. That was never my intention. And there are still more questions to ask, but I hope that thanks to the 13 experts who were good enough to accept my invitation to be interviewed, and I'm deeply grateful to all of them, your knowledge, dear listeners, is now at a higher level, and some of your questions answered about the impact of that new word in our vocabulary, COVID-19. You can find all the podcasts on the World Radio Switzerland McKay Interview webpage, or just Google the McKay Interview if ever you want to listen again or catch up on the ones that you missed. Thanks for listening, and have a safe and enjoyable summer.